Welcome to another episode of the NBR Podcast Summer Series, where my excellent colleagues try and explain what they've been doing all year and justify it with some hot takes. In the chair today, our Aussie correspondent Lachlan Colquhoun. His area of expertise, or in his own view anyway, is cricket. So we're going to ignore that. Lachlan, welcome to the podcast.
So
you've got a lot of area to cover. It's called Australia. I just wonder, out of all of that, out of so much business going on there, has there been one company or one person that's really been the biggest success?
Success? That's a really good question. Look, we've had record profits at companies like Qantas and Woolworths, but I wouldn't say that those companies have been successful because their brands are so on the nose with consumers.
Yeah.
When I think about what's happened in 2024, those companies are the ones that really come to my mind. The two big supermarkets, Coles and Woolworths, and also Qantas. They've been the major stories here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So Qantas. I mean, we've seen Alan Joyce. He's had to go, and they've been on the nose with consumers, and yet they're doing well in terms of the bottom line. How is that possible?
It's been possible because they have very little competition.
Right.
And what happened was that during COVID, the main domestic competitor here, Virgin Airways, went into administration, and they're only just struggling out of that now. So Qantas was able to bank a lot of the COVID money that they got from the government, and controversially use that to keep themselves going, rather than returning it to shareholders or giving it to their staff. And all their customers, they took sort of billions of dollars in bookings from customers and didn't deliver on the flights, and just said that, you can have another flight later, when and they'd been charged by the ACCC over that.
Yeah.
So Qantas, their behaviour during the pandemic was ethically questionable.
Right.
But there's no doubt that it set them up for success now, and that's what we're seeing because the competition's so weak. They've really been helped by the Australian government, who have stopped Qatar Airlines, refused their request to have more flights into Australia. Qatar have taken the step now of buying into Virgin, so we may get more competition in future. Yep. But really, Qantas. They made sure that they were well capitalised at a time when the industry was in trouble. Competitors went to the wall, not just Virgin, but Rex, which is a regional carrier, which very foolishly tried to take them on the eastern seaboard capital city routes. They went bust. So it's a lack of competition,
right.
And also some government protection, you'd have to say. Qantas is, even though it's still it is now a private company and has been since the privatisation in the early 90s, there's still a very, very close relationship between government and Qantas, and they are almost like a protected species.
We had all those sort of allegations that the Prime Minister, Mr Albanese, was actually getting preferential treatment or asking for upgrades and lounge access and those kinds of things as well. Seems very cosy.
Well, he's not the only one, Simon. I'm part of the summer series for NBR. I've done a feature interviewing Joe Aston, who was the very controversial commentator for the Financial Review, who had the Financial Review banned from Qantas lounges because of his ongoing criticism of Alan Joyce. And his book is called The Chairman's Lounge. Right. He details how just about every politician in Australia and every business leader is in a position of desperately wanting to be invited to be part of this Chairman's Lounge club. And he makes the point that these politicians, they're probably the only people in Australia who can book a business class return flight to London and only pay economy. Because of the upgrades that they can get through making a call to somebody in Qantas. So, I mean, that's a huge difference. There's a $6,000 difference between a business class return fare to London and an economy. So that's the advantage that these people are getting through and you have to say, what influence does it give Qantas in the boardrooms and in the parliaments of Australia? A hell of a lot is the answer to that.
So the other companies that you mentioned are ones that we're familiar with, like Woolworths and Coles. Supermarkets just seem to, consumers just can't stand them over here, and they can't seem to stand them over there.
Yeah, well, I mean, interestingly enough, we have the Macquarie Dictionary. They coin a word of the year in Australia, and the word of the year in Australia this year is Colesworth, which is an amalgam of both Coles and Woolworths. So they become this sort of single-headed monster that is preying on the consumer.
Right.
So look, once again, they have the advantage of very little competition, so it's a bit of a duopoly. They enjoy the duopoly. They mine the duopoly for their profits. And this year, of course, we've seen a big pushback against that as the cost of living's gone up, and they've been blamed for price gouging. We've seen the ACCC; they're taking them to court. Both of them are alleged to have. On about 200 occasions each have been advertising products as being on special when in fact they're not on special at all. And there's been a government inquiry into them. So big pushback against those two companies. Whether we're going to see anything in 2025 in terms of regulatory control remains to be seen.
Okay. It's a little bit disappointing when I say, can you name the biggest success, and then you come out with Qantas and Colesworth.
Well, I mean, there have been other successes. I mean, everybody likes Guzman y Gomez. I don't know if you have them in New Zealand. They're
what are they?
a Mexican fast food chain.
Oh.
It's an IPO. They were the biggest IPO on the ASX in 2024.
Was it Guzman y Gomez?
Guzman y Gomez, famous for their burritos and tacos. Apparently, young people love it. So it's an idea that it's supposed to be healthy fast food. So they raised about, I think they were worth about $3.3 billion at their IPO, and it's gone gangbusters ever since. Wow. They've got big plans to expand. They're already in some Asian countries, and they've got big plans to expand into the United States as well. So that was if you ask us success, they're not big, but that was one of the big stories of 2024.
I haven't come across the ditch as yet.
No.
Do you, in your reporting, what was the biggest story for you to report on this year?
Oh, good heavens, there have been so many of them.
You reported all sorts of things like cocaine and Qantas and all sorts of things over the years.
Well, I always like stories about people behaving badly. It could have been because I used to be a police reporter in a younger life, so I like it when people behave badly. So I really enjoyed, and I didn't know very much about him previously, but I enjoyed covering the Mark Bryers trial.
Oh yes,
he's somebody who'd be very well known to Kiwis for his involvement in the blue chip business that went bust.
I remember reporting on him then. Yep.
And so it was fascinating to learn. I mean, I think Hamish, our editor, said, "Look out for the Bryers trial that's coming up." And so I got onto it. And so Bryers was he moved to Australia in about 2000, started up another business, which was an accounting business, which went bust, owing about $7 million. He survived that and sort of reinvented himself as a consultant to what eventually proved to be a scam to rip off the Australian Taxation Office. And so only last week he was sentenced to all up about 8.5 years in jail for his role in that. And what they were doing there was we have in Australia these payroll companies. I don't know whether you have them in New Zealand. So the payroll company will take the money from the employer, and they'll distribute it, some of it to employees, some of it to the tax office, and a lot of it to the superannuation fund chosen by the employee. So Bryers was involved in this scam with these people who were not remitting funds back to the Australian Taxation Office, and were then closing down their company, sending them bust, and then seeking to get away with it. A very crude scam, as the judge said, and he was caught along with about 4 or 5 of his colleagues, and there was a monster trial that went on for months. They had a jury trial, which was incredible to think that lay people would have been able to understand the complexities of what was an incredibly complicated trial. Found guilty. He's been in jail since June, and last week he was sentenced to 8.5 years in jail. So as a journalist, you always like to see people who possibly of questionable ethics getting what's due to them.
Yep, but sort of, it seems tit for tat, right? Australia gives us the 501s and we give you Mark Bryers.
Well, funnily enough, I noticed in the comments to my stories in NBR that some of the NBR readers were suggesting that we'd be sending him back across the ditch when his
absolutely
when he was released from jail. But that won't be until 2032.
Oh well, we'll all be at the airport in 2032 then. All right, let's just wrap up. What do you think is going to catch your eye in 2025?
Look, we've got a federal election coming up in May. Politics is also on my round, and that's going to be incredibly influential as to what happens in Australia. We mentioned before the supermarkets. Both parties have got a different approach to how to deal with the supermarkets. If the coalition, the centre-right coalition under Peter Dutton win, he's talking about breakup powers, divesting powers which is bizarre, given that the centre right are traditionally a free market party, but he's talking about heavy stick regulation on the supermarkets. So the election looks as if it's going to be incredibly tight. All the polls have now the coalition leading by a whisker against the Labor Party, which would be amazing, because Australia very unusual for us to not have a two-term government. If Labor lose, it'll be a one-term government, which will be a disaster for the party. So that's going to be fascinating, and we'll have big changes here if the coalition get in there. He's got a nuclear energy policy which is quite controversial, and so I mentioned his hard line against the supermarkets. All kinds of things are going to change if the coalition win, and it's line ball at the moment.
Right, and when are we expecting that?
By May, yeah.
By May.
So we have to have that by May, but people are saying probably April. So it's going to be a busy first part of the year.
Absolutely. All right. Well, hopefully, Lachlan, you get some rest and recreation and enjoy the rest of the cricket season. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure, Simon. Cheers.